So next we'll go into some of the challenges faced by workers in the gig economy. This will give you a few ideas on how you can serve these clients, and as we go through, you'll see that this goes far beyond traditional tax compliance work. First, many of them need help setting up their businesses. Bad advice is really rampant among freelancers and gig economy workers. They're getting advice from all over, and often they don't know how to vet the source of that information. They might just hear something from a friend or a blog post about setting up an S-Corp so that they can pay less tax, but they don't really know why they're doing it or how to consider the cost versus the potential self-employment tax savings. For example, I once worked with a very highly paid freelance consultant to the healthcare industry. She'd heard she needed to set up an S-Corp to save taxes, so she did. She set up the S-Corp. But then she didn't pay herself a salary. And the good news is that she was making quarterly estimated tax payments. But once she established the S-Corp, she started sending those estimated payments to the IRS under the S-Corp's employer ID number instead of her own social security number because she didn't realize that an S-Corp is a pass-through entity and doesn't pay tax at that level. Her husband had been preparing their individual tax return for years, so neither of them really knew why they had the S-Corp. They just incurred the expense of setting it up, but they weren't really doing what needed to be done so that they could take advantage of the tax-saving opportunities. Other people I've talked to know that they need a tax ID number, so they go online to get one, wind up at the wrong website, and end up paying several $100s for a tax ID number that they could have got for free through the IRS website. There's just a lot of misinformation out there that we as tax professionals sort of take for granted, and if we can catch their attention early, we can help them do things right the first time. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't seek out help until they've gotten themselves in a bind. Now, they may have set up a business entity and they realize they don't know how to prepare a business return, so they look for help. Or they might have a single member LLC and they don't realize it's a disregarded entity that doesn't need its own tax return. Or maybe they're getting notices from the IRS and need help getting those issues sorted out. That's a pretty common way for them to seek out help. And gig workers might also need help knowing what to charge for their services. This is especially challenging for creative freelancers like artists, designers, and writers. The world at large doesn't always value creative work, and everyone's asking them to work for quote-unquote exposure, other words, for free. And they might be uncomfortable talking about fees with their clients, so they just undercharge or accept whatever client offers because they're happy to have work. But they don't know that they need to build certain costs like income taxes, self-employment taxes, health insurance, retirement savings, and other costs of doing business into their rates. And if they can get good advice on these issues early on, that's really the difference between business growth and failure for them. And especially if gig workers are trying to grow their business as a side hustle while working a day job, they may need help with hobby loss rules. It's not uncommon for small businesses, especially bloggers and Etsy sellers, to take a few years to grow a following and turn a profit. And if they're not careful, they can run afoul of hobby loss rules. But if they are aware of the steps they need to take to run their business like a business, things like keeping books, opening a separate business bank account, getting proper licenses, or having a written business plan. Of course, these steps won't prevent an IRS challenge to their business status, but if they are audited, they'll have a much better chance of preserving their business deductions. And as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Continuing on with challenges that gig workers face, accurately tracking expenses can be a huge problem. Often they're not aware of the types of expenses they can write off, especially when it comes to things like home office expenses and mileage. Again, they're picking up information from friends, other freelancers, and sometimes unreliable online sources when they really need sound advice that's appropriate to their unique circumstances. Even if they know what they can deduct, are they tracking their expenses? I once helped a former rideshare driver respond to an IRS notice. She hadn't reported her rideshare income for 3 years because she never received a 1099, and it was sent to an old address. This girl was a college student when she was driving, and fortunately she was smart enough to always use a particular credit card for gas and other expenses, but she had no receipts at all, and she never tracked her business miles versus her personal miles. Fortunately, we were able to get the amount the IRS said she owed reduced significantly, but she still probably paid more than she would have if she'd known how to track her expenses right from the get-go. And if a gig economy worker is in a business where their income fluctuates from month to month, which is pretty common, they might need help with budgeting and managing their cash flow. And they might need help establishing policies for collecting receivables. On paper, they're making money, but they don't have the cash to pay their bills because all of their revenues are sitting in receivables. And you can also help them figure out how to balance paying themselves with reinvesting in their business. Some small business owners feel like in order to grow, they need to put all of their profits back into the business, which is great until they run into trouble paying their personal expenses and taking care of their families. And obviously, paying estimated taxes is another big issue. It can be a real rude awakening when someone goes from being a W-2 employee to freelancing, and all of a sudden they have to pay quarterly estimated taxes. They're not prepared for it, they haven't set the money aside, and even if someone is used to paying estimated taxes, tax reform and the new pass-through deduction really changes things up. They might not know how the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will impact them or if it even applies to their business. And another problem I see all the time is freelancers and small business owners thinking they need to spend a bunch of money at year-end to avoid taxes. I can't tell you how many times I've had people ask me whether they should buy a new vehicle, office equipment, inventory, or supplies at year-end just for the tax deduction. Of course, as professionals, we know it doesn't make sense to spend a bunch of money just to avoid taxes. If you're paying taxes, you're probably making money, and that's a good thing. So you can help them decide when it is a good idea to invest in their business versus when it's a good idea to keep their profits and just pay the tax. And we're going on. There's more challenges faced by workers. If your idea of the gig economy worker has just been task platforms and rideshare drivers, you might not realize that they hire independent contractors and employees. There's actually a lot of messaging in gig economy and freelancer circles about outsourcing so that they can put more focus into their core business activities. The thought of hiring a virtual assistant, outsourcing the development or maintenance of a website, or even, yes, accounting tasks, it's not foreign to them. But when they hire that help, they may not know how to differentiate between employees and independent contractors, or know how to handle payroll or issue 1099s. And saving for retirement is, of course, another big issue. In 2015, Prudential reported that only about 6% of gig workers have assets in an employer-sponsored retirement plan. That's compared to a little more than half of full-time workers. So practitioners can use their expertise to help gig workers navigate the options and tax benefits of available retirement accounts. Health insurance is another big issue. Some freelancers may have access to a spouse's employer-sponsored health coverage, but others need to buy coverage on the market. Maybe they should be contributing to an HSA, or if they don't have access to coverage through an employer-sponsored plan, they can take advantage of the above-the-line deduction for self-employed health insurance. And of course, sales and other taxes are another area where gig economy workers often need help. You may recall that last year, Airbnb started collecting lodging taxes on behalf of some cities and states. Local governments realized that there was this huge potential tax base that they were missing out on because rental owners using the platform weren't paying the lodging taxes that hotels had to pay. They started sending notices to property owners, and it got a lot of media attention. The fact is, these technologies are just growing faster than really any tax system can keep up with. So practitioners really need to be on the front lines, helping their clients navigate tax compliance in an evolving economy.